How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the OneIQ Football Talk podcast with Brendan and Sterling. Sterling, how you doing, my friend? As we get ready for Week 18 in the NFL season, the last official week for my Chicago Bears, and what is probably going to be the last official week for your Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah, barring a couple of helpful wins somewhere, I'm looking forward to it. It's like the playoffs is starting early for me, man. You know,
Oh, I know all
it's
about that. Playoffs started 4 weeks ago for me, so.
right. It's gonna be a fun weekend of football. Probably very stressful for me. Starts today. See if my Steelers can win, and then we gotta have a couple of things happen tomorrow. So it's gonna be interesting.
Without a doubt, and yeah, going into this week, it was no Thursday game. Obviously, as we typically record these on Saturday, the Saturday game is going to be happening a little bit later. And the first game up here, which is one of the games that we are going to talk a little bit about, is your Steelers and Ravens are going to be going up against each other. And then we also have another divisional matchup for the Texans and Colts. But ultimately, just right before we get into our game predictions, I want to give a massive shout out to the people that make the schedule year in year out, because we always talk about, coming into the end of the year, like important games, and they just seemingly got it right, because for your Steelers, they're going to have to go up against arguably the best team in the NFL right now.
hmm
Pardon me, as I'm still trying to recover from a little bit of a sickness. And the Colts and Texans, the winner of this game is likely going to decide who's going to win that division. The Browns and Bengals, the Bengals are just fighting for anything. I don't think they're mathematically eliminated, but it's one of those things. The Browns are in there. That's going to be a fun game to watch. Lions already have the division locked up, but the Jags versus Texans, that's not an automatic win for the Jacksonville Jaguars, and they need to guaranteed win this game just to hope.
hmm
You look at some other games, my Bears versus the Green Bay Packers, that's going to have some very large implications of the Green Bay Packers playoff hopes. You
You
know,
could crush their hopes.
yes, we can, and we'll talk about that later. And then another phenomenal matchup here for the final game on Sunday, where we have the Bills versus Dolphins, which is ultimately going to decide who wins that division. And
hmm
we could see a lot of great stuff happen, and just a large round of applause to the schedule makers for just looking at this and going, just giving us some chef's kiss here right at the end of the year.
Yeah, since we switched to this new, division format at the end of the year, because it used to be just, random teams playing random teams. You could have an AFC NFC matchup, but a few years back they sort of switched over and they're like, let's save some big division matchups for week 17, week 18 and really try and get the emotions up for those last 2 weeks. So it's been great. And a couple of divisions could have some unique finishes to them, if the Bengals manage to pull out a win, then the AFC North is going to have an entire grid of winning records. And with the NFC South, if the Bucks and the Saints both lose their games, then we're going to have an entire division with losing records, and one of them making the playoffs with a home game. Just
Uh,
absolutely nuts.
that brings me back to when the Seahawks went into the playoffs. I think it was like a 7-9
Yep.
record. That was what, 2008? And
Yeah, that was a while ago.
I remember the Bears going into Seattle for that game, and they just absolutely no. I think that was maybe a couple years later that might have happened, but just remembering the Seahawks making it with a 7-9 record, and everyone sitting back going like, "There's a 10-team win. There's a team with 10 wins that isn't making the playoffs because of you. Just know that."
Yeah.
And that almost kind of feels like the same thing when the Commanders made the playoffs a couple years ago, when all those teams were kind of just in that little bit of, we're not great, but we're also not terrible. And it was like, Commanders, you do realize you're in the playoffs with like an 8-8 record. Just be happy that you're here and know that you're taking, a spot away from a bigger team. And yeah, honestly, it's likely going to be a situation that happens where we will see one of those AFC South teams come in with a losing record. Maybe
I mean,
not again,
it's a
depending on
tall
who
order for the
wins.
Panthers to beat the Buccaneers.
True, true. I
Yeah.
don't care if the Panthers win or lose. Does not affect me anymore. Bears officially have the number one pick locked up, so I'm happy as all can be in that
Hmm.
regard. But as we do, and we're going to jump in right away and talk about our game picks of the particular week. Sterling, as it's the first game and it's your game, we have the jersey on, the flag behind you. Steelers versus Ravens. Steelers, Mason Rudolph making the team look somewhat competent on offense.
Yep.
Take us through this game.
Yeah, I mean, the last couple weeks, really, it's been the defense that has been struggling. The offense has been getting it done, putting up 30 points both those games that Mason Rudolph's been in. A lot of questions for Mike Tomlin now as to why Mitch Trubisky was relied on for so long as the number two and the replacement for Kenny Pickett when Mason Rudolph's been able to come out and do this. Um, but yeah, it's going to be a unique week. It's always tough when Steelers and Ravens play. Ravens really have nothing to play for. They've locked up that number one seed already. We know no Lamar Jackson. We know Roquan Smith is not playing. I'm sure if others like OBJ and Zay Flowers, eh, Patrick Queen, if they're in, I don't think they'll be playing the whole game. Um, but Tyler Huntley has been serviceable as the backup there. He's won some games for that Ravens team. He's gone up against TJ Watt, so he knows what he's in for. Um, the Steelers team has been playing lights out, though. I've talked to a lot of people, and the first 15 weeks of this season, they had no right being in playoff talks. They had no right making the playoffs. They were going to be a one and done team. But you look at them the last 2 weeks, how consistently they've moved the ball. If the defense can get back rolling again, the main issue there is injuries. Injuries in the safety position and up the middle with the linebackers. That's tough. But if they can find a way to get rolling there, the Steelers team could walk into the playoffs and upset one of these top ranked teams, I feel. Because it's looking like if they make it in, it's either going to be the Chiefs or the Dolphins. And with how they're playing right now, I could see them upsetting either one of those teams in the playoffs. So this is a big game for Pittsburgh. They have to keep this rolling. I don't know if they'll be able to put up 30 points against Baltimore because these games are always so gritty and tough. But without Lamar Jackson in there, and the Steelers did already beat Lamar Jackson once this year, I do think the Steelers are going to be able to come away with a win here. Um, the spread last I saw was sitting at 4 points.
It's at
Has that
three currently.
it's at three currently, and
Three in favor for
usually
Pittsburgh.
these games are decided by 1 or 2 points. And so, I mean, for this one, I am choosing the Steelers to win with all those backups of the Ravens playing, and then I don't think I don't think the Ravens are going to cover a 3 point spread there.
Yeah, this was one of the more tougher games for me to pick this week because the Ravens, from top to bottom, are just so good, and even their depth. They have guys that can come in. Their depth players are really, really good, and it's one of those situations where I understand where this Steelers team is not, or pardon me, this Ravens team is not playing a lot of their starters, or they're taking out some of their key starters for this game, and obviously that is completely understandable. You're looking at that going, you'd be crazy if you didn't take out some of these players for this particular game.
Hmm.
Um, and you know what? The Steelers have been better on offense, but they have also struggled a little bit more on defense. This, for me, I look at it and go, you know, are we seeing just a few weeks of Mason Rudolph and him just having that little bit of magic that we see every once in a while from backup quarterbacks? They come in, they light it up, and then they finally just meet a team and they get tested. This is one of those divisional games where these two teams, it's almost like the Bears versus Packers, where these two teams hate each other and they're going to go after each other.
Hmm.
I
And
am going to pick the Steelers to win just because they have a little bit of momentum on their side, but I am, however, going to pick the Ravens to cover the spread. I think this is going to be a really close game, and I think it's probably just ultimately going to be who has the ball last, and Steelers are going to kick one of those last second field goals.
Yeah, and I mean, if there's any coach that's going to be able to solve Mason Rudolph quickly, it's going to be Harbaugh because he has faced him before.
Hmm.
There's that familiarity there, and so that is a definite concern. Um, and yeah, it is. It's a question. Is this just the backup magic that we're seeing for Mason Rudolph, or is this him coming in finally and going, "This is finally my shot. I was originally the one drafted to take the helm of this team, and I'm going to show you guys why." And I've expressed to a lot of people this week, I've said, if he wins this week and the Steelers do manage to sneak into the playoffs there, and then he wins us a playoff game on the road in either Arrowhead or Miami, there has to be a serious discussion of, is Mason Rudolph the QB1 at the start of next year? It's not like he's much older than Kenny Pickett. He's only 3 years older.
Because how old is Mason Rudolph? He's
Mason
28.
Rudolph's only 28 right now. And so he's sort of hitting that prime age for a lot of quarterbacks, that late 20s into early 30s where we see a lot of the guys be most successful. And Kenny Pickett being 25 already, honestly, I would roll with Mason Rudolph if he's able to keep this going like this and shows why he deserves it.
Well, I think at this point for the Steelers, just what we've seen from Mason Rudolph compared to Kenny Pickett, even if the Steelers lose today and he looks bad, and let's say they win, they go into the playoffs, they get embarrassed, those types of situations. I think going into next season, it is without a doubt, unless you draft someone in the first round, which
Mhm.
I'm not completely dismissing, or
No,
you
me neither.
trade for a quarterback. If you don't do either of those two things, or you sign a high profile free agent quarterback, these two guys are, you have to let them battle it out in training camp. Trubisky's not going to be there.
No.
So,
I mean,
it
he will still be under contract, so he may still be there if they don't cut him, but he's going to be the de facto number three and essentially just an extra quarterback coach next year.
without a doubt, we've seen pretty much at this point that Trubisky is, he's not it. He's not the guy.
No.
We knew he wasn't that in Chicago. We knew he wasn't that with Buffalo, and we sure as hell, it has now been sealed or stamped of approval
Mhm.
multiple times with Pittsburgh of just like, okay, yep, he's just not this particular guy. And at least with Mason Rudolph, he's moving the team. The team has confidence behind him, and I think those two
Mhm.
guys, you're gonna have to have a serious conversation about them battling it out in training camp.
I agree. I think it'll be fun to watch. I'm hoping Pittsburgh doesn't go the route of signing that high profile quarterback unless they can get him dirt cheap. Just because if Sean Payton can't make him work, then Mike Tomlin's not going to be able to make him work either.
Oh, I wasn't even thinking Russell Wilson. I was thinking more of the White persuasion in Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, I don't think that'll happen. I think it's looking more like it's Russell Wilson unless they make a move with your Bears to bring in Justin Fields if you guys opt to go the quarterback route with that number one pick. But that's a
Which,
discussion for another week for
no, well,
sure.
that's a discussion for a little bit later for sure, because I still have some,
Hmm.
opinions about that. But I still don't think Russell Wilson is going to be a prime target coming out. I think he is
Hmm.
just, I genuinely don't think he's going to be signed until the season, if he is signed at all, because I think that's how little confidence the NFL has in Russell Wilson right now. But moving forward, we can talk about
Hmm.
that in Rant Street a little bit later. We have the Texans taking on the Colts, with the Texans currently at a 1 point favorite over the Colts.
Yeah, and that makes sense. This is going to be a tight game. Neither of these teams really anticipated being in a fight for a playoff spot, let alone the division at the start of the year. The Texans had picked 2 and 3. They were building for the future this year, and the Colts had Anthony Richardson at the start of the year for the same reason, to build for the future. Richardson went down. Minshew comes in, and he's done Gardner Minshew things. It's what he's sort of done everywhere he goes. He's a very serviceable backup to the point where at some point a team in this league that's struggling has to bring him in and give him a legitimate shot as a day one starter.
He's
I really
without a
do feel
doubt
like he's
a
earned it,
top 30 quarterback in the NFL.
right?
I
I
don't know
really
if you're
feel
gonna
he's earned
pass
it.
him, get him up into that top 20 category, but from that 30 to 20
Mhm.
mark, you can make a serious argument that he's without a doubt in there. Which, unfortunately for Minshew, is also that area where most teams are gonna go. We're likely gonna try to find a replacement for you unless you're a year one or two quarterback.
Yeah. Yeah, it is unfortunate, and he seems like he's destined to take the route of like a Ryan Fitzpatrick, a career backup guy who's going to go to a team that's got an injury and shine for them, win them some games and make them go, oh shit, now we're not going to get a really good draft pick, but at least we put some butts in the seats. Man, this is going to be a fun one to watch. CJ Stroud's back from that injury. Um, as we discussed, I sort of picked him up for my fantasy team, so I'm hoping he goes off a bit this week. Man, the only thing I hope for with this game is that it doesn't end in a tie, because a Texans Colts tie means it doesn't matter if the Steelers win or lose.
Yep.
And so that's my only thing. I am going to go with the Texans this week. It was a very tough choice though. Both these teams have been good. The Colts have been on a roll lately. But I feel like the Texans have more of that explosive offense style, and I think they might be able to catch this Colts team off guard a little bit at home, thinking they're going to have an easy week of it, and it's going to be close. But I mean, a 1 point spread, you really, I don't know if it's going to be a 1 point game. I think it's going to be a 2 or 3 point game. So Texans win and cover that spread, obviously, because I believe Colts are favored in this game.
The Texans are favored.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I thought they would favor the Colts at home.
Yeah, no, the Texans have that 1 point favor, but this is again one of those really, really tight, close games that's going to be extremely, extremely close and difficult for both of them
Mhm.
to come in, and it's going to be fun to watch. And right now, if you're the Indianapolis Colts and you're Gardner Minshew, you're walking out saying, you know what? I know I'm not going to be the starting quarterback of this team next year. They drafted a kid for that very reason. And so I'm just going to go out. He's going to play loose. He's going to play confident and just saying, you know what? This is my situation where I can say to the NFL, to someone, maybe your Pittsburgh Steelers, like, hey, I can potentially be a starting quarterback in this league long
Mhm.
term. And but for the Texans, they're looking at this going, you know what? We weren't supposed to be here. No one had any hope for us to be here. Most teams thought it was going to be the Cardinals and the Texans being the worst two teams at the start of the year, given the Cardinals picked 1 and 2 and just kind of chasing their rebuild. The Texans, most people thought they would be better this year than they were last year. Obviously, getting Will Anderson and CJ Stroud, never in a million years thought it would be where they are right now, but and for CJ Stroud, this is such an important game. He can go out there and say, listen, I can win these important matchups in the
Mhm.
NFL that are key critical moments. And for that very reason, I have more faith in CJ Stroud and this Texans team than I do the Indianapolis Colts team right now because I just feel like the Texans are just that little bit more ahead. So I'm picking the Texans to win. And obviously, I think they're going to cover that 1 point spread as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, going back to the scheduling that you mentioned at the top of the show here, like this was brilliant by the NFL. I'm tired of watching my Steelers on Saturday. It sucks. But I mean, these two games are so pivotal for many of tomorrow's games. A Steelers win puts the pressure on the Bills, puts pressure on the Jags, and then no matter the outcome of the Texans Colts, whichever team wins is going to put more pressure on the Jaguars.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just going to make it so much more fun. If the Steelers lose, then the Bills are sort of like, oh, okay, we're going to make the playoffs anyway, we're fine. It takes some of the pressure out of that game. So that's one of the reasons I'm hoping they win. And yeah, that Texans Colts game, it's going to be smash mouth fun to watch for a
with
Saturday.
without a doubt. Now another AFC North battle where it's the Browns versus the Bengals, and this is just kind of one of those weird things where if you were to come in and say, you know what, it's one team that is in the playoffs and one team that's just trying to fight for any hope of potentially making it, I don't think the Browns or the Bengals are mathematically eliminated. They might be, but no one ever would have thought it was going to be the Browns that were favored on the actual roster, and with the way Joe Flacco has been playing and how good he has been for this team over the last couple weeks after coming off the couch. But looking at this game, the Cincinnati Bengals are 7-point favorites in it, which I think is potentially a little bit high, but the Browns might be
Mhm.
trying to sit some players here at the moment, and
They
ultimately,
are.
so
Yeah.
that is
Yeah,
okay.
the
The Bengals are mathematically eliminated from the playoffs at this point, as I'm just double checking
Yeah, the
everything.
Browns are sitting a few of their players, namely Joe Flacco. He's been so good. They got the playoffs locked up already. They're like, let's rest Joe, let him be healthy for wild card weekend. And it's crazy. Like, they're going to be the first team since I can't remember what year of your Chicago Bears that start five quarterbacks throughout the season and make the playoffs. It's only happened once in history, and it was your Chicago Bears that did it. And now the Cleveland Browns are going to be starting their fifth different starting quarterback for the season. And that I think is the key reason why the Bengals are such high point favorites in that game. It's expected to win. And as I mentioned, if the Bengals do manage to win, that's an entire AFC North division with a winning record, with them finishing at 9-8. It's going to be it's going to be interesting. That game. It was a hard one to pick as well because the Browns defense has been so up and down the last few weeks after being such a strong team through most of the season. The injuries sort of caught up with them. Resting Joe Flacco, I don't think Amari Cooper is going to play either, and so the Browns team really is just sort of handing a win to the Bengals. It feels like at this point, which I don't believe Jamar Chase is back yet either. With them being mathematically eliminated, there would be no point bringing him back in. Give Jake Browning another week here. Let the Bengals go out, have some fun, and win a game in Week 18. Because yeah, I am picking the Browns to win this. Um,
You're picking
I
the
don't
Browns to
know.
win this?
Oh, Bengals to win this.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm picking the Bengals to win this. I don't think it's going to be very high scoring because of a lot of the talent isn't there, and so I do think it'll be close. So the Browns will cover that spread.
Yeah, this is just going to be one of those weird games. If Joe Flacco was starting in this particular one, I would go out there and say that the Browns are going to win, cover, and make it look easy. But with him resting and, the Bengals not really having anything to fight for other than just to try to go out there and just get that extra win, having a winning season,
Hmm.
uh, you know,
And
and
they
last
need a win
opportunity for
against an
Jake
AFC
Browning.
North opponent here.
They do.
They
They do.
they've as far as I recall, they've been shut out this year so far in the AFC North. They are 0-5.
Yeah, which for them just getting that one little moral victory this year would be something. I do agree. I do think the Bengals are going to go out there and win this one. With that 7 point spread, I'm a little shocked that it's that high for Cincinnati. So I'm gonna pick Cleveland to cover just because I think it's gonna be a close game. I don't think it's gonna be high scoring like what you were also saying. Yeah, it's just gonna be interesting to say the least. The over under for this game is 36.5 points, so they're already looking at it being low scoring, and they have such a wide spread. It's one of
Hmm.
those things where I'm like, really? Okay. Moving forward, we have the Detroit Lions taking on the Minnesota Vikings, where the Detroit Lions have a minus 3.5 point favorite. And these two teams, again, the Vikings, I don't believe, as I'm just going to take double check here, I don't think they're mathematically eliminated. They still have an opportunity. Obviously, they're going to have to go out there and try to beat the Detroit Lions, and the Packers are ultimately going to have to lose to the Chicago Bears. So there's going to be a lot of math that's going to have to go into the equation for the Minnesota Vikings to actually reach the playoffs. But it's a massive game for them. And for the Detroit Lions, I still believe that they potentially are fighting for that number one overall seed in the NFC. Um,
Not the number one, but the number two.
yeah,
They're
still
fighting for
trying.
that two spot still.
Yes, you are indeed correct. As the 49ers kind of have that one
Yeah.
ultimately locked pretty much up and still fighting for a lot of stuff here. I don't think we're probably going to see the Lions players, starters play a lot if we see most of them play. Again, like Jared Goff, Amon-Ra
Mhm.
St. Brown, maybe see a little bit more of Jahmyr Gibbs in this particular game, but they might ultimately say, hey, we have David Montgomery to be kind of that little bit more, and so we'll utilize him. Going to be interesting to say the least, but um, I'm gonna pick the Lions to win this game just mostly because if you watched the Vikings and their quarterback play the last couple of weeks, Nick Mullins is trash. He's not that great, and I don't even know who their starting quarterback is gonna be. It just seems to be this kind of rotating cycle of you get to go, no,
Mhm.
you get to go, no, you get to go. Everyone gets an opportunity to play,
Yeah,
and
it's like they roll a dice on Saturday and go, okay, you're starting. Yeah.
Exactly. It just doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. And right now, Lions playing a little bit better. Even if they do rest some players, I just don't think the Vikings are going to have enough here. And I think the Lions are ultimately going to get this win. And I think they're probably going to cover that 3.5 point spread.
Yeah, and I don't believe the Lions are planning on resting any of their players, at least not at the start of the game. If they get off to a big lead, then yes, but that two seed is very important to them right now. They want to be able to close this season on a win. They want to get that two seed if they can, because then if it comes down to the top teams playing and they have to go up against the Cowboys or the Eagles, at least they're doing it at home. The only team that they're going to have to worry about traveling to is San Francisco at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And so this will be a big game for the Lions. And yeah, the Vikings have been uninspiring since Kirk Cousins went down with that injury. And it's funny, we saw Justin Jefferson go down first, and everybody was like, "Oh, this season's over." And Kirk Cousins was still sort of managing without him. But as soon as Kirk Cousins went down, this Vikings team just deflated, which, you know, begs the question, do the Vikings really want to move on from Kirk Cousins yet? They don't have anything else in the quarterback room. They're not going to have a very high pick. So sure, they could get one of the mid-level prospects in the draft here for in that first round, but is he going to be NFL ready and as good as a Kirk Cousins right away? And so that really there's going to be a lot of questions for this Vikings team going into the offseason, and they're just sort of in turmoil right now. And for
They're in
that
that
reason,
midst
I'm
of just being completely mid and not being able to
right.
get out of it, and it's
Yeah, they just
so
seem
unfortunate.
totally lost. And so, with how much more the Lions have to play, I also am picking the Lions to win this week. And I think they're going to cover that spread pretty easily. I do expect them to be up by enough at halftime that in the second half, we do see St. Brown, Goff, Montgomery, maybe
Laporta,
even Gibbs sitting down, not playing.
Laporta probably gonna get a
Laporta,
bunch
yeah,
more time
exactly.
out, but yeah,
Just let them rest, or maybe only out there for every second series, just to avoid injury if they can going into the playoff.
yeah. Now moving over to the Jaguars taking on the Texans, and the Jaguars, they really need this win because again, whoever wins later today between the Colts and the Texans, you're gonna have to at least stay at a competitive level with both of
Hmm.
those teams just to even try to figure out a situation there. And so the Jags are favored at 4 points here, and right now the Texans, they're going back to
Right.
Ryan Tannehill. Titans, thank you. Yep.
Yeah. Oh, are they really starting Tannehill?
That's
Why
what
would you?
and it just kind of continues to show that that team is just ultimately kind of lost here at the moment. And I
I,
haven't been a massive fan of Tannehill last couple years. He had that kind of 1 year where he came back in replace after that year after Marcus Mariota, where he looked good. He looked like a stable option, but really hasn't done much after. And they've pretty much just kind of looked for a replacement every single year and haven't
mhm.
really been able to hit. But I don't necessarily blame Will Levis for not necessarily having the best opportunity that he's gone out and played for. He's had a tough
No.
situation, not really having the weapons there, and the team is old, the offensive line sucks,
Yeah.
and the Texans just aren't that great. Our Titans aren't that great of a team, and I think they would love to play spoiler for the Jags, but I think the Jags, they're going to come out swinging in this particular contest, and I think they're going to win this game, and I also think they're going to cover that 4-point spread.
Yeah, the Jags are going to come out swinging for sure. That that surprises me that they're putting Ryan Tannehill in. It feels like Mike Vrabel just flipping the bird at ownership there because from what I've heard, he is done in Tennessee after this year. They are not renewing his contract. And so this is likely the final game we're going to see him coaching the Tennessee Titans. Um, could very well be the last time we see Derrick Henry in a Titans jersey if he even plays. I don't know if he's going to for that reason. He wants to stay healthy and he's like, screw you guys, I got no bonuses on the line. Um, but the Jags really struggle inside their own division at the end of the season. Year in and year out, we see them
Collapse.
just collapse. Exactly. And for that reason, I'm going the other way with this. I think the Titans will successfully play spoiler in this game. I think it'll be close, but Trevor Lawrence still isn't 100%. ETN still isn't 100%. It's I just don't think they're going to be able to get it done. They're on the road. If this was at home, maybe they'd be able to use that fan momentum to get them into it. But I really think that this is going to be Mike Vrabel's swan song of going, you guys are fucking up by not re-signing me. I'm going to go to another team and turn them into a contender because he is one of the better coaches in the league right now, in my opinion. He's been given nothing from
Hmm.
his ownership and his
Year
management.
after
That's
year after year.
exactly. This Titans team has been struggling to build, and going away from Will Levis, who, you talk
Foot
about the
he does
four.
have a foot injury, so
Does
there
he?
is,
Okay.
yeah, so it's not like they're
Okay.
completely benching him, as I was
Okay.
just trying
That's
to look at it fully, and I'm
mhm.
just seeing if he's on the injury report right now. Will Levis is listed as questionable for the game, so
Okay.
it's more of a situation
That's
of
better.
Ryan Tannehill coming in saying, you know what, there's no reason to put the young quarterback out
Yeah.
there with injury anyways, so
No, that makes much more sense because I'm looking at the four quarterbacks drafted and I'm like, Will Levis is easily the second best of the four because we didn't get a large enough sample size from Richardson, and Bryce Young has just been destroyed all season long on a terrible team, you know? Um, yeah, I think the Titans are going to win this one. I think they're going to play spoilers, upset the Jags, and bump them from the playoffs.
wow. Okay. Now moving forward to the Jets taking on the Patriots in, I think, what I'm going to call the toilet bowl of this week, because we have two
Yeah.
franchises who are both just horrible right now. And, it is kind of fun to watch ultimately how this division has two teams that are pretty decent and two
Hmm.
teams who are just so far and away bad. And you know what? For the Jets, or a team that was Super Bowl hopefuls this year with Aaron Rodgers, and you know what? I will say they have a Super Bowl caliber defense, but it's
Yep.
just their quarterback situation, man, just hasn't been good enough, and their offense has just been so up and down with the play of the quarterback, and it really is one of those situations where if Aaron Rodgers was there, I feel like they would probably be competing for the division title here potentially. And well, the Patriots are just kind of a joke this year, but the last few weeks they've been able to sneak out a couple of wins. And in this game, the Patriots are favored by 2 points at home at Gillette Stadium. But with that being said, I still think the Jets are going to be able to go out there and beat Bill Belichick, because Robert Saleh, he
Mhm.
is still looking at this going, you know what? This is how bad our season was, that we lost our quarterback and we were still able to compete. We were playing with guys that realistically should never be starters in the NFL, and we were able to compete and do this. And I still think the Patriots aren't that good of a team. The over under in this particular game is at 30.5 points. So I think
Yeah.
that's the lowest over under that we've had this year, which is in which is hilarious to think about. We saw a very small over under for that Patriots Steelers game earlier in the year,
Mhm.
and that one just got blown out of the wind. But I am going to choose the Jets, and I am picking them on the spread, obviously, because New England is favored.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, the Patriots, the thing with them is it's Bill Belichick. He refuses to just lay down and die, which I'm sure is driving Robert Kraft a little bit crazy right now because that team is truly entering full rebuild mode at the end of this season, I feel. And they're fighting for that third overall pick at this point. They're like, we really want that number 3 pick because the further down they fall, the more they're going to have to pay if they want to try and trade up with the Bears. The higher their pick, the less they're going to have to sacrifice to get that pick away from you guys. Because they need to finish ahead of the Cardinals in that respect because we know the Cards are likely in the looking at a wide receiver, and so the Bears will want to pick ahead of that. And yeah, we saw last week what a decent defense can do to Bailey Zappi and this Patriots offense. And the Jets defense arguably is better than the Bills. So I expect them to also just dismantle that Patriots offense. We'll probably see Ezekiel Elliott do great things
Ezekiel
again,
Elliott things,
and
yep.
be the star of that team, which is what he wanted. But it's not going to be enough. The Jets are going to come away with a win here and obviously cover that spread. Bill Belichick's the wild card in that, and I feel like that's been the case for this Patriots team all season long. It's not can Mac Jones win a game. It's not can Bailey Zappi win a game. It's can Bill Belichick coach a win away from this other team.
Yeah, and Bill Belichick is always the wild card here, but the team is just so bad.
It is so bad, yeah.
Now moving forward, we have the Atlanta Falcons taking on the New Orleans Saints in New Orleans, where the Saints are 3-point favorites. And last week, the Atlanta Falcons got embarrassed by the Chicago Bears. The Bears
Mm-hmm.
looked so far and away the better team in that particular game, and it really just showed that Arthur Smith should no longer be the head coach of that team and should have been fired yesteryear because he just cannot scheme anything. The Bears lost their starting corner in Jalen Johnson, their Pro Bowl corner, who's likely going to be an All Pro as well, easily one of the best corners in the NFL, and they still couldn't get Drake London going. And Bijan Robinson didn't have an amazing day. Kyle Pitts didn't get anything going. How do you have those three guys and not get anything going? Granted, I will say it was up against a really good Bears defense, so that's not
Mm-hmm.
an easy accomplishment, but other teams have still been able to get their stars into games, and I think the Saints are going to take this one just solely because I Arthur Smith is going to coach the Falcons out of this game. Like how we were talking about Bill Belichick coaching his team to win games, Arthur Smith is coaching his team out of games, it feels like. And this Falcons defense is a top 10 defense statistically. But
Mm-hmm.
I think just right now they're just looking at their offense going, we don't know what's going on. We don't know who our quarterback's going to be, and our head coach doesn't know how to call an offensive play. So I guess we're going to be out here. It's going to be 3-and-out, back out there. 3-and-out, back out there. And the Saints, who aren't a great team this year, Derek Carr has been so below average this year. It's kind of embarrassing. But I think the Saints are going to walk out and see what the Bears did and go, well, we can do that. There's no
Mm-hmm.
reason we shouldn't be able to do that. And I think the Saints are going to win this one, and they're easily going to cover this 3-point spread.
Yeah, and I mean, the Smith has got to go. Like he is the fundamental problem in Atlanta right now. Like I looked at this division at the start of the year and I was excited for this game because I really felt like this was going to be the game that was deciding the division for the NFC South because I felt the Falcons had enough on paper that they should be competitive and they were for a while. But most of that competitive was because the Saints and the Bucks were not as good as we anticipated.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Saints are in a spot they must win here, tied with the Bucks right now, and they're sending up a prayer to the Panthers, hoping they can somehow beat the Buccaneers so the Saints can squeak into the playoffs. Don't think that's going to happen. But they're ultimately fighting for a playoff spot. They're hoping. And so the Saints are going to come out hungry and fighting, and I think they're going to embarrass this Falcons team in the final week of the season here.
Yeah,
You know, it won't be pretty, unless it's one of these magic weeks where it is Bijan Robinson going off all of a sudden, because but it feels like
it's going to be Arthur Smith's coming out and using Drake London, Kyle Pitts, and
right,
Bijan Robinson to their fullest extent, and he's somehow going to convince ownership. He's going to go, I finally unlocked them. They just learned my offense finally. And then it's going to be
right.
next year of like, oh, okay, we screwed up by keeping him. But I can't imagine a world where the Falcons keep Arthur Smith.
hmm I know, but from what I hear, they are planning on it. From what I hear, he is planned to be the head coach for next season as well, which is just ludicrous because you're just begging for your team to be bad yet again.
Yep.
And I know that Commanders fans will be watching this game because they want a Saints win, because that should lock up the number 2 pick for them in this draft. You locked up
Correct.
that number 1 pick last week, and the Commanders are going to be watching this game tight,
Trying to hope for
assuming
that
they can
number
also
two.
lose, if they don't magically pull an upset later when we talk about that.
Yeah.
But yeah,
In true
this,
Ron Rivera fashion, he'll walk out of that building, middle fingers
right?
up, going, I got the win, just like what Lovie Smith did last year for the Texans.
Exactly. Yeah, that would be quite amusing to see, honestly. But yeah, Saints will win this one. They'll embarrass the Falcons, and we'll all go into next season going, great. It's going to be the same thing again for the Falcons, and it's just sad to see because there's so much talent on both sides of the ball there, and it's being wasted.
The best part is that the Falcons are going to go out there, they're going to draft another wide receiver or an
hmm
offensive piece that's going to be really fun and going to go, wow, this team, they're going to have Drake London, Kyle Pitts, Bijan Robinson, and insert name. Like, for instance, let's just
hmm
say the Falcons go out and draft Malik Neighbors. You're just like, oh, wow, you have Drake London and Malik Neighbors as your two top wide receivers. Look out, NFL, and then it's just going to be Arthur Smith going, I'm not going to throw them the ball.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, especially with talks of them being one of the favorite spots for a guy like Russell Wilson to land as well. Um, it's going to be the Denver Broncos 2.0. That first season we saw of Russ in Denver, it's going to be just garbage. It's painful
th-
to watch.
Now going over to another divisional matchup where we were talking about the Buccaneers. They are taking on the Carolina Panthers in Charlotte. And the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are minus 4 point favorites in this particular matchup. I think the Buccaneers are going to win because they are looking at the game opposite to them, to the Falcons and Saints, and they are saying to themselves, we need a win just to make sure that we can try to guarantee ourselves a spot in this game. And with how bad the Panthers have been this year, and you know what, Baker Mayfield, he has some hurt ribs here at the moment, but we've seen Baker Mayfield in some of these high pressure games be the most dangerous that he's ever been. He, like, Baker Mayfield at the end of the day is one of those quarterbacks that does seem to rise more to the occasion. We saw it in college. We saw it when he was playing for Cleveland in some of these higher pressure games. And it sounds like the Buccaneers like him. They want to keep him around, which I think they should with the level of play that he's shown this year. And you know what? I think the Bucks are gonna walk away with a big time victory here. They're gonna try to ultimately embarrass the Panthers, saying, you know what, this is our division. We deserve it more than either of the other two teams that are here with the Falcons and Saints. And they're really just hoping for a Saints loss, but they still need to get that victory nonetheless. And I
Yeah.
think they're gonna cover that 4 point spread, no problem.
Yeah, and I do believe they hold the tiebreak with the Saints right now, and so ultimately that's all they have to do. The Saints are going to be hoping for the Bucks to lose, whereas if the Bucks win, they don't have to worry about anything else. They win, they're in the playoffs, they have a home game, they're going to have somebody coming into Tampa to play next week. That's all they have to concern themselves with. And to do so, they only have to beat the worst team in the league. And so really, there's no reason to think the Buccaneers won't pull this out. You know, this could we're likely seeing Evans in his final games as a Tampa Bay Buccaneer as well. You know, they're talking about Baker Mayfield being the guy going forward. And so Baker's got to make a statement, and Mike Evans is still trying to increase his stock for next year. So I think the Bucks do. They're going to come out and thoroughly rash this Panthers team.
Which, again, most of the year I've been hoping for the Panthers to lose, lose, lose,
Mm-hmm.
lose, and I got my way. Don't really care if they win or lose this week because they gave me the first overall pick, and it don't
Yep.
really matter to me. But speaking of my Chicago Bears, they are heading up to Lambeau Field to take on the Green Bay Packers. Every single week that the Bears and Packers play, it is the least amount of enjoyment that I feel as a Bears fan. It is something that I hate because it's one of those things where I hate the Packers. Fuck the Packers. They are not a team that I like. I hate everything about them. I hate their organization. I hate their fans. I hate the way that they've been able to beat this team year in, year out. And the last time the Bears won at Lambeau Field was all the way back in 2015 on Thanksgiving. Jay Cutler was our quarterback still at that point. The Bears need the Bears aren't fighting for a playoff spot, but the Packers are.
Mm-hmm.
So this game to me, I've been saying it all week long, means more to the Chicago Bears than it does the Green Bay Packers. Yet the Bears aren't fighting for anything because the Packers are thinking about this game as in terms of trying to set up their next few weeks. This game, however, is going to set up the Chicago Bears for the next few years in ultimately what happens. And what I mean by that is the Bears have a quarterback situation where Justin Fields has improved this season and looked much better over the last couple weeks. But with that being said, hasn't been enough to convince everyone, and you have that number one overall pick with a lot of talented quarterbacks coming in. Drake May, Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, one of those three guys, likely going to be Caleb Williams at that number one overall spot. You can reset the quarterback market timeline for your team, and you put him in a situation where no other first overall pick has had a situation like that. You know, coming in with the amount of talent that's already on this roster. If Justin Fields can go out there and outperform Jordan Love, and not just barely outperform him, but truly outperform him and eliminate the Green Bay Packers, to me, that is the only way that his job in Chicago is safe moving forward. And it's one of those weird things where uh, it really does feel like this game and this game alone is going to be the ultimate final decision on Justin Fields. Because Jordan Love, his year so far, if you take his stats and put it into the all-time for Chicago Bears single season, he has the greatest year by a quarterback out of any single Chicago Bears quarterback that has ever played. That is sad to think about. Granted, Justin Fields was hurt for a portion of these games, but he still wouldn't have had the same stats as Jordan Love. He needs to go out there against a team that he's struggled against a defensive scheme that he struggles against, because Green Bay runs a lot of zone, and Justin Fields has shown that he struggles against zoned. That if he can go out there and dominate this game and eliminate the Green Bay Packers, and I mean, he has to do both of those things. It can't be one or the other of like, oh, he played an amazing game, but the Packers still won. It's like, no, no, no.
Mm-hmm.
He has to go out there, he has to dominate, and he needs to clearly outperform Jordan Love and beat the Green Bay Packers, in my opinion, to be the Chicago Bears quarterback next year. I think the Green Bay Packers are going to underestimate the Chicago Bears defense because this defense is good. I think this defense is hungry. I think you're going to see an 85 style Bears defense coming out there this week where they're going to be angry. They're going to be pissed off, and they're going to say to this Green Bay team at your home field, we are going to kick your ass. I'm picking the Bears to win this. Bears cover the spread of -3 for Green Bay. I think the Bears walk away with the win here. And I know I'm just loading up the shotgun right here at the moment and shooting myself or preparing to shoot myself in the foot by saying all of this. Bears win. Bears win big against the Green Bay Packers at Lambeau Field, eliminating from the playoffs.
Yeah, I don't know about the win big part, but yeah, we talked about this back in week 1 when Jordan Love came in and beat your Bears there, and you were just so defeated at that point. Jordan Love's had a very up and down season. He's looked good, he's looked bad. Justin Fields has consistently improved. You know, the Chicago Bears defense since the trade deadline has massively improved. This is a big game. We saw it last year, week 18. Lions went in and
Did the exact same
just
thing.
exactly. They destroyed the Packers' hopes for the playoffs, ended Aaron Rodgers' career in Green Bay, and sort of solidified themselves as the new number one in that division. And now that's what the Bears have to do this week is they need to go into Lambeau, have a dominant game where there's no question that they were the better team throughout, whether it's a blowout win or whether it's a 3-point win. You still need to be able to look at that game and go, Justin Fields was the better quarterback. The Chicago Bears were the better defense. This Chicago team is better than the Green Bay Packers right now. That has to happen for Justin Fields to remain the quarterback in Chicago. You're absolutely correct. You know, and if it doesn't, if for some reason, you know, the stat line for Jordan Love is better, but the Bears still squeak out a win, there's going to be a lot of questions of do we still stick with Fields or do we trade him away and hit the reset button at the quarterback position? Um, that being said, I think the Bears are going to be going to this game a lot hungrier than the Packers. The Packers have sort of just been floating through this season trying to find their identity, and I don't think they found it yet, honestly. You know, they're still riding the coattails of the Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers back-to-back era, feeling like they just deserve to be the best because they're the cheeseheads, you know. And I think the Bears are going to go in there, slap them in the mouth, and show them that hey, you're going to have to fight to be competitive in this division going forward because the NFC North is no longer a one dog fight. It's 3 or maybe even 4. And so I also am going to pick the Bears to win this game and obviously cover that spread with the Packers being favored.
I gotta say, I was waiting for the but. And then when you finally said but, I was like, and here it comes. And he's going to start shitting on my team, and it's going to be all, deserving, and this, and the other thing. But it didn't come, and you know what? Needless to say, I'm a little bit shocked. But,
No, man, your Bears have looked good the last few weeks. You know, like look at where they started out. You were, you know, what 4 or 5 weeks into the season, and we're like, oh wow, the Bears are going to have the number 1 and the number 2 pick. And now you're sitting at the point where you could finish 8 and 9 and not even finish last place in your division. You could still finish second place in your division, I do believe.
uh,
What's the Vikings record sitting at?
well, the Vikings are the only team, technically speaking, right now. We have a tiebreak with Minnesota, and if we beat the Packers, we would all be 8-9. And that
Yeah,
that's
so
if
you would
that's if the
finish second.
Vikings win. That's if the Vikings win, we'd all be 8-9, so we'd all technically be tied for second. So
Yeah, see, so I mean, but I think you would hold the tiebreakers against them, and so
I
that
would
would
I would
leave
have
you
to
with.
take a look at that again
We
just
would
to
have to
make
take a
sure,
look,
but
but
yeah,
either way, like you know,
interesting nonetheless.
this is a big game for your Bears, and they've been playing much better down the stretch. They've been one of the better teams in the league in December here. So
Now moving over to the Broncos taking on the Raiders at Las Vegas, and
mhm.
the Raiders are minus 3-point favorites.
Yeah, this was a close runner-up, I feel, to our weekly toilet bowl because this is two other teams that have not looked consistently good. They're both rolling with backup quarterbacks. Um, it sounds like it's you know the last hurrah for a lot of players on at least the Raiders team, probably the Broncos as well. Hunter Renfro's pretty sure he's out the door. I've seen rumors floating around that either Devonte Adams or Max Crosby or maybe both could be dealt before the draft, just to build up some more capital and start a full rebuild there. We know the Broncos are moving on from Russ. It's been a mess for these two AFC West teams where for the last 2 years, at the start of the year, we were always like, they have the potential. They could be fighting. We could be looking at a division with all winning records. I'm not looking forward to watching this game. I probably won't. I'm sure you're going to watch it just because it's week 18 and you get to watch your parents sort of jab at each other all day long, playing each
Well,
other in
the
the.
Bears game will be on at the same time, so I will be watching it on our projector, and they'll be watching it
Hmm,
upstairs on their
right. So
TV.
you'll get
And
to hear the shouting jabs as one
yeah,
team does better. And
it's
yeah,
like what I like to call in this household the domestic violence bowl.
exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And what a way to end the season, right? Um, but yeah, there's nothing special I see going on in this game. Raiders are at home. Raiders win. Raiders cover that spread.
Yeah, and the Raiders continue on with their win streak over the Denver Broncos, which I think is at like 1,400 something. I
Days, yeah.
very Yeah, since the last time the Broncos beat the Raiders, and I think that's going to continue. I look at this Raiders team, Antonio Pierce, he's fighting for that head coaching job. He really is, and I think if he can sneak out this victory against the Denver Broncos here at the end of the year, it's one of those things where he goes, you know what? I deserve this head coaching job. I really think he does. Why would the Raiders try to move on elsewhere? And if he gets this win against this divisional rival to stamp off the year and go 8-9, to put that team at 8-9, and just to kind of have that evenness and go, listen, they're a better team on paper, because I do think the Broncos are a better team on paper. But we saw Jarrett Stidham last week. Just Yeah, he won the game, but he wasn't much better. And Broncos fans are going, well, he was so much better than what we saw Russell Wilson do. It's like you guys were facing the Chargers.
Hmm.
The Chargers pretty much since Justin Herbert went down, it's been like, okay, our season's done, nothing
Yep.
matters. Here we go.
And not just Herbert, but Keenan Allen hasn't played since week 14.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it really is a situation right now where this team is just, I just don't think the Broncos have it. Sean Payton, he's just kind of sitting here at the moment going like, I guess we're just going to ride it out with Stidham here at the end of the year, find my new quarterback going into next year, and we'll go from there. And yeah, I think the Raiders come away with this one. The Broncos will likely be embarrassed by the Raiders. Obviously, they started the year. Uh, Broncos lost to the Raiders, and everyone just kind of laughed at the Broncos, going, "Hey, Russ, we still riding?" And
Hmm.
now we don't even get the opportunity to say, "Hey, Russ, you still riding?" Because he's all been kicked out. He's been kicked out of the
I mean,
stables.
he's riding. He's just riding the bench.
Technically not wrong there. But yeah, now moving over to the Philadelphia Eagles taking on the New York Giants at MetLife, where the Philadelphia Eagles currently hold a minus 4.5 point favorite.
Oh, how the Eagles have fallen. I remember when they were 13 and 14-point favorites in the games they were playing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the Eagles have to get right. They have to figure out what's going on because they have lost some big games to some bad teams. It feels like the 49ers just slapped them down a few weeks back and they have not been the same team since.
Mm-hmm.
They have not been able to bounce back from that. And they need to here. Like they're in jeopardy of being a wild card team and having to travel on the road to likely Tampa Bay or somewhere like that in the first round in the wild card round. So I don't know. This is best case scenario last game for the Eagles because they're actually playing a team that's worse than the Cardinals team that beat them last week. And so I I, I can't pick the Giants. They've just looked too horrible for too long. The DeVito days are done. There's no more of that Italian magic happening. And so I hate picking them because they've been busting me week in and week out when I'm picking the Eagles, but I have to keep picking them. They just, on paper, they are too good of a team to keep losing these games. At some point, they have to bounce back. And they have to do it now because going in to the playoffs with a loss to the Cardinals and then a loss to the Giants, it's going to just destroy them. Honestly, even if they win this week, I don't know if they come out with a win in Wild Card weekend. But I am picking the Giants to win, and they will cover that spread
You're picking
simply
the
because.
Giants to win.
Oh, sorry, the Eagles to win. Yeah,
I'm
picking
sitting
the
back
Eagles.
going like,
Yeah,
after all that, he's just throwing the biggest curveball and go, yeah, I'm picking the Giants to win. Yeah, no
yeah.
problem. Just like,
No, Eagles to win, and they'll cover that spread because the Giants just can't put points on the board.
yeah. And I went into this game saying to myself, you know what? I'd like to pick the Giants to win in this particular matchup. They have shown some sparks of life over the last few weeks. And that last game against the Eagles, they kept it close, man. They kept it really, really close. And this Eagles team, they have without a doubt been the biggest frauds of the entire NFL. Where they started out so hot. Well, they didn't even start out hot. They started out as a team that was like, oh, you managed to beat that team. Better fix it soon. Oh, you managed to beat that team too. Ugh,
Hmm.
that wasn't pretty. Oh, you managed to beat Washington in overtime. Ah, yeah, good for you guys. And I read something this week where it showed the Lions are 11-5 and they're celebrating like they won the Super Bowl, while the Eagles are 11-5 and all of their fans are as depressed as they could possibly be, going like, and it's
Right.
hilarious because the Eagles, that's really how their season has been. They have easily been the um, Minnesota Vikings of last year, where they're walking into the playoffs, because I do believe they are going to win this game and cover the spread, but they're walking into the playoffs and everyone's looking at them. I think even Tampa Bay is looking at them going, "We don't fear you."
No, I don't
Like,
think anybody fears the Eagles this year like they did last year.
yeah, exactly. And I think the Eagles are going to try to build a little bit of confidence in this game, but the Giants, they're going to keep it closer. And you know what? I'm
Hmm.
actually going to change that. I think the Giants are going to keep it close enough to cover the spread in this particular game. And the Eagles are going to walk away. They're going to be like, "Yeah, we won, but is this a game where we can ultimately feel comfortable about that win, like we've done with so many of these wins where like we won, it's not pretty. A win's a win, and
Yeah,
we got to be happy with that, but we're not." And that's ultimately just been the tale of the tape this year for this Eagles team. And again, I think you and I are both pretty much in agreement here. Them going into the playoffs, I don't think whoever they play, whether it's a team with a losing record, let's say Tampa Bay gets in 8-9, I think Tampa Bay's still looking at it going like, yeah, sure, okay, we'll take on the Eagles.
yeah.
Moving forward, we have the Seattle Seahawks taking on the Arizona Cardinals, where Seattle is minus 3-point favorites.
Yeah, Seattle looking to bounce back this week against the Cardinals team that's been on the rise since Kyler Murray came back. They've been looking better every week. They've lost some pieces here and there, but between Kyler Murray and James Conner, Trey McBride has been making a name for himself. Um, this Cardinals team has something to build on going forward. It's going to be tough for them to move on from Kyler Murray now, unfortunately, for management, who initially that was their plan. They they've upset some teams, some really good teams, some mediocre teams. We thought they were going to be one of the worst in the league, and the last few weeks they've climbed out of both of our bottom fives. They've been in and out, but prior to that they were consistently there. And the Seahawks are still fighting for a playoff spot. You know, this was a tough one for me to choose just because the Cardinals have been so dynamic in the way that they're able to upset teams. And if they can protect Kyler Murray like they did last week against the Eagles, then I think they'll be able to pull an upset. But Pete Carroll is very much like a new age Bill Belichick. He finds ways to win those really important games. And I think he will find a way to do that this week as well. And the Seahawks are going to come out with a win and then be hoping for a couple losses by key teams so they can squeak into the playoff.
Yeah, I think the Cardinals, they have shown a lot of improvement this year. That at the beginning of the year with Josh Dobbs, we looked at them and said, you know what, this is a team that they're not going to win a lot of games, but boy oh boy, they have fight. They are, decent to watch. And since Kyler Murray came back, it hasn't been perfect with Kyler Murray, but I think he's shown enough to the point where the Cardinals kind of got to stick with him. And obviously, next year is going to be the year where his contract fully starts to kick in and they're going to have to start to pay him all that money. You might as well go get him a talented weapon at wide receiver or
Mm-hmm.
tight end. Well, they do have Trey McBride, so they don't really need to go that tight end route. But you know what? Just getting Brock Bowers or any of these wide receivers that they can possibly get, it's going to be good for Kyler Murray, and put weapons around him and just continue to build with this team. The Seahawks have just been this roller coaster. When they've been up, they've been great. When they've been down, they've been bad. And it's just up and down, and so much to kind of look at and ultimately just figure out. And it's been really, really a weird year. But like what you said, Pete Carroll is one of those coaches that is kind of getting closer to the near end of his career, but he just finds ways to win because he is such a great coach. And I do think Seattle is ultimately going to come away with this win just because they need it. They are not eliminated from the playoffs here at the moment. They're going to need some help for sure. And you know what? First way to get that help is by winning. Because if you don't win, doesn't matter what any of the extra help is. The only team
Mm-hmm.
that can actually lose this week and still mathematically make the playoffs is your Steelers, which is hilarious to think about. But
Yep.
yeah, with that 3 point spread, I think the Seahawks are going to cover that as well. And moving into what is going to be an interesting game where we have the Kansas City Chiefs taking on the Los Angeles Chargers at SoFi Stadium, where the Chargers are 3.5 point favorites.
Yep. Yeah, surprising to see the Chargers as favorites to win and 3.5 points, but the Chiefs are in a position right now. They know they have the number 3 seed locked up.
Yeah,
That's it. They can't move up to number 2 with a win.
can't lose
They
it.
can't drop down to 4 with a loss. And so for them, it's much like the Ravens and the 49ers. It's a rest week. So I don't believe we're seeing Patrick Mahomes. Um, Travis Kelsey might see the field a little bit just because he is chasing a bonus, I believe. And so I think Andy Reid is going to let him play for a little bit just to see if he can get those receptions and those yards he needs. But beyond that, it's backup day for the Chiefs. That being said, this Chargers team is trash. I still don't think Keenan Allen's going to be playing. I don't see a point in putting him in there. Easton Stick has not inspired hope. The defense is still banged up. Um, I think the Chiefs are still going to pull out a win here. Honestly, like
Yeah, I
that.
completely agree with you. I looked at this game and went, you know what? The Chiefs are going to be resting players, but even while
Mhm.
they're resting players, they're still a better team than what the Chargers are going to be able to roll on out with ever
Mhm.
who they decide to do with that particular team. And I'm just gonna take a quick look at whoever the backup is at quarterback for KC,
Yeah,
which is Blaine Gabbert. And it's not gonna probably inspire a ton of confidence and hope
no.
for this Chiefs team, but I do think they're gonna win. However, I do think the Chargers are gonna cover the spread just because even with this Chiefs team, with all their starters in, that
Mhm.
offense, whether it's Andy Reid, Matt Nagy, a combination of both of them, it is bad, man. It's bad, and I don't think the backups are immediately going to come in and make it look like this otherworldly special unit. But that's how bad the Chargers are. Is that
Yeah.
I think even with all the extra scenarios here, I still think the Chiefs are going to win, but the Chargers are going to keep it close, and I could genuinely see this game being like 16-15.
Yeah.
which would be hilarious to think about. Rams take on the 49ers. They go upstate into Santa Clara, and 49ers are favored 4 points in this one.
The 49ers are still favored in this game?
Yep.
That is ludicrous to me. I disagree with that very highly. Um, it's going to be the Sam Darnold show. No Christian McCaffrey, no Brock Purdy. I believe they're sitting Debo Samuel, George Kittle.
Brandon
It's
Ayuk.
yeah, they're doing the exact same thing the Ravens are doing, and I don't know why they would still the bet makers would put the Niners as favorites. That's just silly. This isn't going to be an interesting game to watch. I think it's going to be an easy win for the Rams so that they can make it into the playoffs here. You know, the Rams have been hot lately. They've been playing very well. Matt Stafford has got things rolling. Cup's playing good. Nakua's good. You know, Tyler Higbee's been on. Kyron Williams has been on fire. Um, yeah, Rams are going to win this game and obviously cover the spread since, you know, the Niners are favored.
Yeah, and when I initially looked at this game, it was my first instincts was okay, picking the 49ers because of the 49ers and this is the Rams. But the more and more I thought about it, I was like, yeah, this isn't going to be an easy win for the 49ers. If they had all their starters out there and they were playing for something, yeah, sure, easy win for the 49ers, I think. But with them sitting a bunch of people, and this Rams team really fighting for that playoff spot and saying, hey, we're a team that can get this going and we should potentially be there. And I have to agree with you. Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp, they're both playing phenomenal. Matthew Stafford is doing Matthew Stafford things. And this Rams team, they're going to come out there, and I think they're not going to win in spectacular fashion. I still think this game is going to be close, even with a bunch of the 49ers backups in. I still think it's going to be a close game, but I think the Rams are ultimately going to come away with this victory, and I think the 49ers will likely. They can't cover the spread because they're
Yeah.
down, so the Rams win the game and cover the spread. So moving over to the Cowboys taking on the Commanders, where the Cowboys are 13-point favorites.
Um, yeah, this Cowboys team, it's very up and down. You know, they really did not deserve to win that game last week. That was some bad, bad play calling by the refs in that at the end of that game. Um, the Cowboys have been this tale of two teams, much like the Dolphins. We've talked about it all season, and they just keep proving it. At home, they are lights out. They are dominant usually. They play very good. You put them on the road or outdoors, and it's a very different team we see. You know, that like I had a hard time with this, like because you think Cowboys all the way, but if they're gonna lose a game, it's gonna be to a team like the Commanders. Unfortunately, that's what we've seen them do, is go out there and lose to these awkward teams on the road, and you're like, what is this? We thought you guys were supposed to be dem boys, and I thought Dak Prescott was the MVP. Um, I don't think the Commanders will get it done this week, though. I think they're looking at it going, you know, we really want a top three pick. We can't afford a win right now. um, so the Cowboys will win this game, but I think the Commanders will cover that spread because the Cowboys usually aren't impressive on the road. You know, they struggle putting up the 45 points when they're playing away. And so the Commanders will keep it closer than 13 points.
The only time the Cowboys put up high numbers on the road was week one against the Giants, where they put up that 40 goose egg against them.
Yeah.
And ever since that point, it's been kind of this team where they just haven't been super great. They're 3-5 away. But this Commanders team is just so bad, man. And who knows who's the starting quarterback is gonna be? But Ron Rivera, he might know that he's gonna be on his way out. He might just throw that middle finger up to the press box and say to Magic Johnson, listen, you AIDS-riddled fuck, I'm not going to give you that top pick easily. You're going to have to send me on my way, and I'm going to continue to do this and win this game, kind of like what Lovie Smith did to the Texans last year. And
Hmm.
but with that still being said, I think the Cowboys are still going to be able to walk away with a victory here in today's contest, and just ultimately, I I don't think they're going to cover the spread with that 13 points. That seems pretty high to me. And even with looking at the Commanders, last week they were down by the 49ers. We knew that game was going to happen. It was kind of that get right back game for the 49ers. The week prior to against the Jets, they were down for most of the game and then almost came back. And
Hmm.
this Commanders team can show a little bit of fight, and it's going to be interesting to say the least. I'm not going to be watching it, obviously, because my Bears game will still be on, but yeah, I think Cowboys win, but they're not going to win by dominant fashion. I think it's actually probably going to be closer than what both of us expect it to be. Commanders might get close to pulling up an upset, but I don't think it will. And for the final game of the 2023-2024 regular season, we have the Buffalo Bills heading down to Miami to take on the Dolphins.
Yep, this is. I mean, this was the best choice for them to have as the final primetime game. Um, the Bills are playing for their lives here. We talked about them in the standings. Depending on which teams win throughout the rest of the weekend before them, they could be playing for the situation of win for the number 2 seed or lose and miss the playoffs entirely, which is insane to think about. Such a swing. You're the second place or you're eighth place.
Yep.
It's crazy. Um, but the Dolphins have some demons to exercise here. They got destroyed by the Bills early in the season. They've been having this up and down roller coaster lately, dealing with injuries to Waddle, Mostert, A-Chain, Jalen Ramsey. So it's a beat up Dolphins team, and the Bills have been rolling. The Bills, I believe they've won 4 straight now after everybody started writing them off, thinking, oh, they're done. There's no way they're making the playoffs, and they've come back. But Josh Allen still,
Is Josh Allen.
you know, yeah, like even last week, he did not look that impressive in the win against the Patriots. He didn't throw a touchdown at all. He had an interception. I believe his pass rating was like 58.5. If he does that this week, the Dolphins are going to win, and I think the Dolphins, much like we talked about the Cowboys, when they're at home, they play lights out. When they're on the road, it's a little less inspiring. And so I think we're going to see this season series split, and the Dolphins are going to come away with a win here. I do think the Bills will be able to keep it close, but I think Josh Allen is going to turn it over at the end to seal their fate.
Yep. And the point spread is -2 points for
Minus,
Buffalo. So if you're picking Miami, you're picking Miami
yeah,
for both. And
yeah.
yeah, this game holds so much importance. It's going to be such a fun game to watch because these two teams are electric, they're static, and it's just going to be a great overall game. And Miami's at home. They're 7 and
Hmm.
1 at home. And I think they have kind of had this year of where it's been like, oh, you can't beat good teams. And if they're going to walk into the playoffs, they're going to have to beat this Buffalo Bills team to ultimately slap them down and say, listen, we don't think you're going to have it this year. This is our year to win this division. And being at home, it's going to be really, really good for them because they're not going to have to travel up to Buffalo. And honestly, for me, I'm picking this game solely because the Dolphins are at home. If it was in Buffalo, I'd be picking the Bills. And
Yeah.
Josh Allen, turnover prone, and we've seen in some of these big, big games, he just can't get it done. And ultimately, that's what it's going to be for me. I think Mike McDaniels is going to call up a very clean game in this one. and it's just going to be so much fun to watch. And I am also picking the Dolphins in this one, both to win and cover the spread.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean this game I believe has the highest over under this week at set at 50 points, and I still took the over even at 50 points because I'm like I can see both these teams scoring 30 easily.
Currently, it is at 48.5 points this particular week, but as I just
So
looked
it's dropping down a
through,
bit.
it does appear that it is the highest. The next one up is 47.5. That is the Colts and Texans.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, a 48.5 point game. I could still see both of these two teams coming out, but I could also see both of these two teams somehow put up 15, 20 points in that
Yeah,
area as
it's
well.
possible.
It's going to be interesting to say the least. But now moving over to our top five and our bottom five teams of the week. And both of us feel like the bottom five a lot easier to choose than our top five. And I'll explain my top five situation in a little bit. But as per usual, I'll let you start us off.
Yeah, my top five was tough too. You know, we're in the last week of the season. It doesn't matter quite as much right now. My one and two are the same as it's been for weeks. You know, Ravens number one, 49ers number two. And really the other three that I set in there are the teams that have been the hottest the last few weeks. And so I've got the Lions sitting at number three, even with that loss to the Cowboys last week, because I feel like they didn't deserve that loss.
We'll
You know,
talk
we've
about that a
all
little bit more in Rant Street
exactly.
because, yeah.
Yeah. You know, and then sitting at four is a team that was surprising for me last week to put in there was the Browns. You know, they kept winning. So they're sitting at number four. And then my number five team is a team I just picked to lose, but they're on a 4 game win streak right now, and that's the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, so for me, my top five is the Baltimore Ravens at number one,
Yep.
the San Francisco 49ers at number two. 3, 4, and 5 to me are irrelevant here at the moment.
Yeah.
Because when you think about a top five, you think about, okay, well, you have your top team and your second team. Okay, it's the Ravens, 49ers, and then the drop off from every other team after those two. It's like
Hmm.
I could put the Dolphins at 3. I can put the Lions at 3, the Browns at 3, the Bills at 3, and do all this, and that. To me, I didn't even put any teams there at 3, 4, and 5 just because it they're all so far behind these other two teams. It really almost doesn't matter where you kind of put them, and it's just one of those weird situations where I didn't feel like any team should be 3 or any team should be 4 or 5 just because there's so many teams that you can put there. It's going, okay, for me, what are you going to do this week is ultimately going to determine those next couple of games.
Yeah.
Your bottom
Yeah.
five.
See, and my 3, 4, 5 sort of what I was looking at was, you know, which teams are going to be facing those one and two in the conference championships, you know, and so I sort of figure it's going to be Lions and Browns making it to that conference championship to go up against the Ravens and Niners, and the Bills are sort of that wild card. If they
Yeah.
prove me wrong, they win and they get in, they could be a dark horse to go all the way very easily
Mhm.
because they are such an explosive team. And so that was why I filled out my top five sort of with that. But I agree. After those top two, we're both pretty well convinced that it's going to be Ravens and 49ers unless one of these teams suffers an injury in the divisional week or the conference championship week.
Without a doubt. Your bottom five, good sir.
My bottom five is identical to last week, and I believe the week before. Let's go back and see. Well, there was a bit of a change from week 16, but yeah, from 17 to 18, it's the exact same five teams in the exact same spots. So 28 through 32, I've got the Giants, the Patriots, the Chargers, and then those bottom feeders of the Commanders and the Panthers.
For me, I've been a lot more moving teams around in the bottom five than you have the last couple weeks. I do have a little bit of a change. Still, same bottom five teams are in there. Cardinals are my 28th team going out there and beating Eagles. It has definitely bumped them up a little bit more. Patriots are at 29. The Chargers are at 30. The Commanders at 31, and the Panthers at 32. Mostly being just, Panthers, worst team in the league, Commanders, and Chargers are really just kind of like, okay, well, we're here. And the Patriots and Cardinals have just kind of ultimately shown a little bit more consistency at the end of the year. Not so much for me to throw them past what the Giants are doing, just because the Giants still have that better record than uh, both of those Patriots and Cardinals team. I think they have the same record as the Chargers, but with the way that the Chargers are playing, I think the Giants would kick the shit out of the Chargers at this point. And so yeah, that is ultimately why I have that. Um, but speaking of the Detroit Lions and the Cowboys last week, that had
Hmm.
to be like you and I we always text when we're watching games, this, that, and the other thing. But with that particular game, we're sitting back going like, okay, Lions score. I immediately said, you got to kick the extra point. You got to
Yeah.
tie it. You got to play. And, people are going to say, well, it's going to go into overtime. You don't get the coin toss. Well, you have to look at that. Win or lose the coin toss. You got to go out there. Your defense had been doing fairly decent job throughout that game. There's been moments of where the Cowboys were able to get past your defense, but
Hmm.
if you want to be a Super Bowl caliber team, you have to look at your team on both sides of the ball, on all three sides of the ball, whether that's offense, defense, special teams, and say, you need to make these critical plays at these critical times. And they elected to go for the 2 points. Go in, number 68, Dicker, said to the referee, I'm, I'm eligible to catch a pass, whatever they're calling it. I forget here at the top of the moment, but he's saying, I'm an eligible wide receiver.
Hmm.
And the referee goes, number 70? Sure. And then just says so and so. And you can see on the field that the Cowboys are like, that's weird. I guess I'm going to go cover this guy.
Hmm.
Lions get the 2 points. Flag comes back, and everyone's sitting back going like, well, that's interesting. And at that moment, you and I both looked and went, okay, they're gonna kick the extra point now. Why would you go for it? Dan Campbell says, no, thank you. I'm gonna go be a psychopath and go for the 2 points. Granted, they get the flag, and they have a third opportunity to kick the ball, and they don't take it, and the Cowboys are able to stop that one. But to me, you look back at that play, 100% the referee's fault in that particular instance. Without a doubt. You can look at that and say, it is the ref's fault, no question about it. The Lions should have won that game. With that being said, we've seen it basically in every game where a call, we see it year in, year out, where officials make a call that ultimately costs a team a game. But you know what? You have to move forward. It's what do you do after that call? We go back to that Saints game. You listen to Jared Goff talk about it and go, you know what? Yeah, it wasn't called on the field, so it's not a penalty. Saints still had an opportunity to go out there and win it. It's not like
Hmm.
we had a perfect situation. It's a great listen to if you haven't heard Jared Goff talk about that Rams Saints playoff game with the brutal no pass interference call, this, that, and the other thing. I suggest people go back and listen to it because it's great. But you can be pissed off with the ref on that first play. You got to be pissed
Hmm.
off at Dan Campbell 2 plays after that. It's one of those things. Be aggressive, sure, whatever. You already have a playoff spot locked up, but the Lions go out and win that game. They're fighting this week potentially for that number one seed.
Yeah.
All you had to do was look at that and say, you know what? It didn't work out for us on that 2 point conversion. We're going to be pissed off. We're going to blame the refs. Kick the ball. The first play, refs. The next two, completely on Dan Campbell's. Completely
Yeah.
his fault.
Yeah, and I wasn't surprised to see him go for two because he is an aggressive coach that way, and he's very much that I'm gonna go for the win right here, and so that made sense. I got that, and for all intents, they really should have. I'm not too keen on the league right now coming out and stating, pretty much putting the blame on the players, going, oh well, he wasn't very clear in his claiming his eligibility, and it's like no, like stop defending these refs when they make boneheaded calls. It's reaching a point where maybe they need to start finding some of these refs for these bad calls. I after that call, the NFL has demoted that crew. They are not calling any playoff games. I'm not too happy because unfortunately that is the crew that is officiating the Ravens Steelers game this afternoon. And so that is going to be interesting for me to watch. I really hope that they don't make some move that decides that game one way or the other, honestly. Um, but I understand the frustration from Dan Campbell. He got himself into the tunnel vision because, as he said after, he had been setting that up all day because it had been multiple times throughout the game where it was number 70 that was reporting as eligible, and then that final play, that 2-point conversion where they sent Decker out number 68 and he reported eligible. And we saw all of those three of those linemen go over there to explain it to him, and you clearly see Decker being the one, I'm eligible, making the signal to the ref, and the ref just walks away.
Yeah.
And it makes me think that he didn't care. It's almost like they were like, yeah, we know what you're doing. We're gonna flag you no matter who you decide to throw it to. This flag's coming out. Is what it felt like after that all happened, and I'm glad Jared Goff came out after that game and was like, you know what, I I sent him over to report. I know he reported. The coaches know he reported. We know we did everything right. This was on the refs. It's that simple. I don't care if I get fined for it. End of the day, we lost the game because we decided to continue going for it. Is what it is. Um, but yeah, we were both texting back and forth, and we're like, why are you not kicking point? It didn't work. You had your trickery. It worked in every sense except for the referees decided you don't get this 2 points. And so at that point, you need to just go, let's kick the point, send it to overtime and see what shakes out.
Yeah, and with the league has been such a clusterfuck this year with so many coaches going, you know what, I'm gonna go for it. It feels like these coaches are playing Madden. Like it honestly is really starting to get to that point where it's like you'll see a coach at the 35-yard line and it's
Yep.
4th and 4 and it's like, well, I know this is prime area for us to kick the field goal and get some points, but I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
go for it because some numbers say that it should. It's like, okay, sure, fine. But when you lose the game by 2 points when realistically you should have won,
Mm-hmm.
don't come back to me and say, well, the analytics. It's like, no, no, dude, you had an opportunity. For me, I'm always, you go for the points no matter what, whether it's kicking the ball at the 1 yard line in the first, second, and third quarter, pretty much most of the fourth quarter as well. Until you get to that halfway point of the fourth quarter, then yeah, you got to go for the points in some of those scenarios if you're down.
Mm-hmm.
But go, like, why would you not just take points? Well, we could get more. It's like, yeah, sure, you could.
Yep.
Without a doubt, we've seen teams go for it, make that fourth down conversion, go down, score a touchdown. It's like, okay, yeah, you got 6 or you got 7 points instead of the 3. That's going to help you, without a doubt. But what's wrong with settling for field goals? They're good. There's a reason we have kickers.
Yeah, I feel like part of it is we've seen it since the league has extended to this 18 weeks. That extra game is really when we started seeing a lot more of this risk-taking coaches, going for two much more often. And I feel like part of it is the coaches are going, we just got to try and get the win here. We don't want to play overtime. We already have to play an extra game every season. We have to play an extra quarter for 3 or 4 of those games. It's just increasing the risk and the likelihood of injury. And so I think that is a large part in it. And then you have others that are just those risk-taking coaches where when things are working, they're like, I don't care that it's 4th and 4, we're going for it because I have faith in my defense if we don't get this to be able to get the ball back. Whereas I don't necessarily have faith with the weather conditions that our kicker can make it because we have seen a lot of sure kicks and all of a sudden they're wide and you're going, my God, what's happening with some of these kickers? Kickers can make 50 plus yarders consistently, and then they're missing extra points.
Yeah. But that's the life of a kicker, though. You know, you
Yep.
ultimately are going to have to try to go for that. And like I get it, there are games. For instance, I knew last week with going back to that Cleveland game for the
Hmm.
Bears, it was really shitty conditions, and it's one of those things where going in, that's why you do the pre-kicks during warm-ups to get an idea of what your range is. And coaches say,
Yeah.
this is our range for this side of the field. Conditions might change throughout the game, but this is our absolute maximum that we are willing to possibly go. There is that
Hmm.
situation, and that's why they have that. But most of the time when you're seeing a lot of these questionable decisions, it's like, okay, you're within the range of your kicker. Everyone knows you're in the range of your kicker. Yeah, kickers are going to miss without a
Yep.
doubt, but that's also the reason why you're paying them. Unless you have your kicker's out for the game, and it's a situation where you're looking at your fourth string wide receiver and who had
Hmm.
a little bit of kicking experience, and you're kind of sitting back going like, you might be able to do it. Let's have some fun.
Yeah.
It like then yeah, I get it, but it's just I don't
I know it. It's crazy to see, and we've seen a lot more of the risk taking. Like I said, I do not fault Dan Campbell in that first attempt, and it didn't surprise me at all. I know you were like, "Why isn't he?" It's like this is Dan Campbell, 100%. He's playing for Coach of the Year here. If he
Oh, I
gets this,
it wasn't
he's got it locked
surprising
up.
it wasn't surprising to me that he went for it. I still said to you in a text message, I'm not shocked, but
No,
fucking dumb choice.
yeah,
Dumb choice. Yeah,
no.
he
But I
got it,
mean,
and I immediately texted you as soon as that ball went in. I was like, ballsy, but he did it. And then you
yep,
saw the flag. It's like, okay, second opportunity.
yeah,
To me, that's inexcusable. The first one,
no,
sure, I can understand it. You have those perfect plays. You have a offensive play caller who is brilliant, easily
hmm,
the second top coach coming up into the NFL this particular year, and potentially talk about that here in a little bit. And just a brilliant play calling mind. Love it
yeah,
for sure. And you go for that in those situations. Yeah, I don't agree with it personally, but I
no,
can understand it. That second time, I go, no,
hmm,
it shouldn't even be a consideration. You should look at Ben and say, listen, you drew up the perfect play. It was
yeah.
screwed by the refs. Kick the fucking ball.
Yeah, that's what I mean by he got tunnel vision, and he sort of even admitted to it that he had no intention of going to his kicking team there. Like I saw one interview where they asked him, it was like, on that second one, if you guys had taken a holding penalty and it went back to the 17-yard line and it was 17 yards to get a 2-point conversion, he's like, I still go for it. It's like, that is just, that's the point where you have to sit back and go, well, no, man, you can't be making those decisions. That's how you lose championships.
Mm-hmm.
Like if that was the Super Bowl, like you kick that and you send it to overtime, because why are you just handing the other team a win at that point?
Yep.
So that's
And
something that he needs to consider going forward is, he's got to avoid getting into that tunnel vision when he's like, no, this is our play. It's going to work. It worked. The refs screwed us. We're doing it again. I don't care.
yeah, eh,
Yeah.
it's something that is easily gonna piss me off for years watching coaches go, no, I'm gonna go for it because the analytics aren't on the field. You know what the
Hmm.
analytics say? If you kick the extra point, you're not guaranteed to lose it.
Yeah. Yeah, like I'm not a fan of the guys who pull the analytics, I like Mike Tomlin's, like when he decides to go for it, whether it be 4th and 4 or, last week it was everybody's expecting him to run the ball and they decide to throw it to George Pickens instead. And his is just like, no, we are playing a win. We're not taking our foot off the gas. We're going. I don't care what the analytics say that, oh, we should run the ball. We're throwing the ball here because this team is playing good right now and we are going to keep it rolling. That I prefer. When a coach is just playing by the gut going, you know what? We're playing well in this situation. We're going to go with this instead of what the analytics say we should do.
Yeah, it's gonna be really interesting ultimately what's gonna come
Mhm.
from that, and you and I could probably sit here for
Mm.
an hour or two just discussing that type of stuff, but we've probably already beat that dead horse multiple times.
Yeah.
Um, one of the things that I wanted to talk about this particular podcast as we continue on, and we both have a corner that was drafted in the second round that are both playing really, really well. Obviously, Joey Porter Jr. Most thought
Hmm.
that was going to be the Steelers' first round pick. That pick that you guys got from the Chicago Bears in that Chase Claypool trade ultimately netted you guys Joey Porter Jr. in the second round with that 32nd pick, which technically first round, whatever, the pick was suspended from a team, this, that, and the other thing, semantics. He is easily your guys' best corner. He's
Yeah.
easily probably your best secondary piece when Minkah Fitzpatrick isn't playing. And Minkah Fitzpatrick not playing in today's game. He's been
Nope.
downgraded to out. Robertson was upgraded to in, so if that means anything towards you guys. But it's been great for Joey Porter Jr. And how many interceptions does he have this year? Does he have any? Is he 1, 2?
He's got one or two there, yeah. Like he's got key interceptions. I know he was the one that picked off Lamar Jackson in week 5 to seal that win for us. And so I mean, he's been good enough that he started as our slot corner at the beginning of the year, our number 3 guy. And he quickly supplanted Levi Wallace as the number 2, and within a few weeks he overtook Patrick Peterson as our number 1 cornerback, to the point where Patrick Peterson's looked at it now and gone, I'm considering just shifting my position back to that safety role because we're pretty good at the cornerback and we're really thin for safeties right now. And so that was an interesting thing to see, that Patrick Peterson, the decade long veteran, has decided to sort of just hand that role to Joey Porter Jr. and go, yeah, I'm going to play support wherever else I can to try and funnel those passes towards Joey Porter so he can, swat down more balls, get more interceptions. He's been a great shutdown so far this year. Last week was his worst statistical week of the season, going up against DK Metcalf, but I mean, Metcalf has just been a beast the last 4 or 5 weeks. So I can't fault him that. He was bound to have a week where he got outperformed, but he shut down Puka Nakua. He shut down Jamar Chase. Like he's shut down Amari Cooper. Like he's been a great cornerback. And if they make it into the playoffs, he's going to have to find a way to likely shut down Tyreek Hill. Is what, if it shakes out so that they make it in, it's most likely the Dolphins they're going to have to travel to, and he'll have to find a way to stop Tyreek Hill. So that'll be an interesting matchup.
Joey Porter Jr. only with the 1 interception
Just the
so
one.
far this year. Again, both of us having a second round rookie
Hmm.
coming into this year. And you know what? Joey Porter, I know you were extremely high on him, and he's just steadily improved throughout the year. And he kind of went down that, Pittsburgh Steelers route where he isn't necessarily the main guy at the beginning of the year and just slowly kind of gets more opportunities to show. Tyreek Stevenson, the Chicago Bears second round corner, leads the NFL in all rookies with 4 interceptions. Has had a ton of struggles this year. First half of the year, you're looking at him going like, man, he's making some good plays, but he's also allowing some massive, massive struggles. But that's the situation when you're playing opposite side of Jalen Johnson. You're going to have
Hmm.
nothing but passes thrown your way because they're not going to throw at this guy. And pretty much the last half of this season, Tyreek Stevenson has shown that he could potentially be a number 1 corner in the NFL. And he has Jalen Johnson on the opposite side of him and has played so well the last couple of weeks. I'm looking at this Bears secondary going, man, it is terrifying because you obviously have Jalen Johnson. You have Kyler Gordon, who is rated by PFF as the second best slot corner in the entire NFL. Tyreek Stevenson, who has really started to come on the last couple of weeks, and especially last week, where Jalen Johnson was ultimately out. And he's going to have to be big this week with Jalen Johnson potentially not playing against Green Bay due to a shoulder injury. You have Jaquan Brisker, who has just been nothing but spectacular. He's without a doubt the leader on this defense in only his second year, and it shows. Eddie Jackson ultimately is kind of the weak spot. And even then, he's still doing half decent to the point where you're not super worried about him in there. You don't like the cap hit that he's receiving, but it's been really, really fun to watch the development of both of these young players. And both of us, I think, have really good young corners from the second round, which is ultimately really fun to see happen.
Yep. Yeah, no, it's been good. I mean, the big difference too with the stat numbers is, Joey Porter Jr. has turned into that sort of cornerback where quarterbacks just don't want to throw to that side. Even though that's where their number one receiver is, so they are often going elsewhere, and that's been good for Patrick Peterson because he's gotten a couple extra interceptions because of that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's always nice to have that shutdown corner where you can kind of put him on an island and not really have to worry.
Especially when, for the Pittsburgh Steelers, you got a guy like Jamar Chase that you're going to see twice a year. You
Mm-hmm.
got Zay Flowers coming up with the Ravens that you're going to see twice a year. So it's good to have that number one shutdown.
Yeah, I still think the Steelers are probably going to need a number two guy to kind of ultimately take off because as much as Patrick Peterson has always been a great player,
hmm
he's up there in age and they're going to need that other guy. And it's going to be interesting to see what the Steelers are going to do at that spot during the offseason.
Well, I mean, we have the first white boy as a cornerback enter declaring himself for the draft here, and there has been talks that Pittsburgh might be interested in going that route and taking him in the first round if nothing else falls into their lap that they need. So could be interesting.
Dejeen from Iowa.
Yep,
I read something where people are talking about he's going to be the first white corner taken potentially
in the
ever
first
in the
round.
first round.
Yeah.
And someone retweeted that. I might have sent it to you where it says this is our Jackie Robinson, because if you look at white corners, they just don't exist.
No.
And with how much the NFL, or like the last little bit where the all-star white team versus the all-star black team, people are going to go, well, you guys might have us on offense with certain pieces like the tight ends, the running back, quarterbacks is going to be up for debate, this and that and the other thing. You might have a good defensive line, but everything else you're not going to be able to cover us because you ain't got no corners.
hmm
And we're the white guys, we're all sitting back going like, yep, no, we get that. We can have
Yep.
this guy as our own, be like, he's one of us. It's gonna be hilarious to see him, like, it would be so funny to see him win defensive rookie of the year next year
Yeah.
as a white corner, because it just doesn't happen. You
No.
don't even
I
see
mean,
it in Madden.
no.
Like, even Madden knows it's like white guys don't play corner, so we're not even gonna even potentially try to make one. Like,
Right.
like the best you see in the secondary for white guys is safeties. That
Yeah.
that's it. And even those guys are very few in between.
Right. There hasn't been much since like the late 90s, early 2000s.
Harrison Smith is pretty much the only white
Yeah.
corner I can really think of in the NFL. I know there's probably someone else, and Harrison Smith, he's a good safety. He's a really
hmm
good safety, but he's getting up there in age. But he's probably the only guy there, which is just hilarious to think about.
Yep. Yeah,
So
it is nuts.
as we get into Week 18, I know for my Chicago Bears, likely, well, it is their last game of the year. There's no likely about it. They're mathematically eliminated from the playoffs, and chances are for the Pittsburgh Steelers, very similar situation brewing. They're even with a win, they're still going to need help.
Yep.
Um,
Though
so
not as much help as we've needed in years past.
correct.
So that is a good thing. It will be interesting to see. I think we're going to be able to pull the win today and put the pressure onto those other two teams. Um, and even, as you said, even with a loss, there is still a path for Pittsburgh to get there. It's just then we need the Broncos to win, and we need the Jags and the Bills both to lose. At this point, it's win. You only need one of those two teams to lose.
Yeah, but it's going to be
Yeah.
hilarious. And for you, the biggest thing that you're praying for is that the Texans and Colts don't end in a tie.
Yeah. And
which
I don't think it will.
God no. To
Yeah.
to think a
No.
game is going to end in a tie. Well, funny enough, going back a few years ago, where the Raiders and Chargers both could have made the playoffs if they
Hmm.
ended in a tie, and everyone's sitting back going, "How funny would that be? Ha ha ha! It's never gonna happen." But then it almost did, and then
Yeah.
Brandon Staley ultimately screwed the team, and if he just would have called a timeout instead of, or he didn't, I can't remember the exact situation, but Brandon Staley made a stupid move that ultimately cost the Chargers to lose that
Hmm.
game to the Raiders when they could have ended it in a tie.
Yeah. Yeah, because I mean that's sort of the situation there with that Texans Colts is, if they were to tie, the Jaguars lose, the Bills lose, and I think there was one other, then one of those teams wins the division and the other one gets the seventh seed.
Uh,
But
how?
it's so early in the weekend, you can't gamble on that.
No, what?
Like you got to
There,
go out and win. You got to
yeah,
go out and win. It's
yeah.
that simple. Yeah.
You have to rely on, what is it? 4 games
Hmm.
to ultimately get that decision to be made, which is hilarious
Right.
to
And
think about, that you're just banking on that for both teams, which I don't think
yeah.
either team is ultimately going to do that, but
Nope. And I mean, CJ Stroud is going out there likely looking to light it up and solidify his selection as offensive rookie of the year. You know, after the last couple weeks performance, I think Lamar Jackson has all but guaranteed himself the MVP this season. He really has been a phenomenal asset to his team. His stat lines aren't there like some of the other guys, but really that's the one team you look at and you go, you take away Lamar Jackson, and this Baltimore Ravens team is probably sitting about where the Steelers and the Bengals are right now
yeah,
instead of where they are.
yep,
So
I'd have
it's
to totally
very
agree.
right. I know we talked a few weeks ago and I was really high on Christian McCaffrey, but Lamar Jackson has knocked that down and said, no, it's me.
Yep.
And
I
I think
think
he is
Tyreek Hill
correct.
also getting hurt for that, week, and then the game after, that ultimately ruined his MVP
Hmm.
hopes, because he was trying to get that 2,000-yard season. I still think he is potentially able to do it, but it's going to need a lot of goddamn help. He's going to
Yeah, I
have to
think he
have a
needs like a
monster day,
250-yard game to get there.
which is
Yeah.
not impossible for Tyreek Hill.
No.
He can do that on 5 catches,
Yeah.
just 50-yard
Yeah.
catch
Yeah,
each
it's going to
time.
be fun watching some of the record chasing this weekend here too. You got CeeDee Lamb and Tyreek Hill battling it out for the receiving record for this season at least. Both of them sitting over 1,700 yards, and either one of them could go for 200 plus and possibly get close to that 2,000 mark. You got TJ Watt sitting tied for first in the sack leader race. I don't think anybody's breaking the record this year, but he could potentially be the first player in history to lead the league 3 separate seasons as the sack leader. Got Puka Nakua
Trying to go for
looking
that
at
rookie record.
looking for that rookie record exactly, which oddly enough, the last guy who set that rookie record was also catching passes from Matt Stafford. Um, that dude just is a wide receiver creator apparently.
Yep.
It's going to be fun. There's going to be some fun games. So even if I happen to watch my team lose here in the next few hours, I'll still have something to watch over the rest of the weekend. And if my team wins, then I'm going to be sitting on the edge of my seat for that Jags game as well as that Bills game. So,
Pretty much for you, I think, and I know you don't really like this idea, but if your team loses this week, it
mhm.
ultimately probably makes you more comfortable for the rest of the weekend and for the rest of the year.
Oh, probably yeah, it's much less stressful at
Yes.
that point for sure.
Not
But I mean,
enjoyable, but it's one of those things where you can sit back and go, okay,
yeah,
I don't have to necessarily stress about anything. I don't have to
yeah.
think about my team trying to face this team and then all the semantics with this, that, and the other thing.
Hmm.
Obviously, you want your team to win. You want your team to go to the playoffs.
Right.
But
No matter what, end of the day, like I want a Super Bowl win. And the first step is getting into the playoffs.
yep,
It's a whole new season when we get there. And with what the Steelers team has looked like the last 2 weeks, if they're able to do it again this week, you've got a team that's putting up 30 points a game going into the playoffs if they can keep that rolling. And I could see some upsets happening, man. I got things to look forward to now at least. We were sitting at 7-4 and then all of a sudden lost 3 in a row, 2 of them to the worst teams in the league, and I was ready to write the season off.
Yeah,
And going, you know what? At
as you
least we'll
should
get
at that point.
right at that point. I was like, well, maybe we'll get a top 10 pick. And now we're looking at it going, okay, nope, we're gonna pick, you know, in around that 22 range where we pick every goddamn year. It's almost always in that 19 to 24 is where Pittsburgh picks every year.
Which just has to be so frustrating as a fan.
It it is and it isn't. We have a really good scouting crew, and we often get good talent in that range. And then last year we had a slightly higher pick after trading up from I think 17, so we were able to get Broderick Jones, which key member of that offensive line who has been going off the last few weeks as well. That O line is probably one of the most improved in the league. I mean, Najee Harris and Jalen Warren are both in the top 5 for broken tackles this season. Um, they've just been tearing it up. That O line is having fun. The running game is getting going, which has made it easy for Mason Rudolph to come in and shine. And ultimately, I hope that just keeps going, man. Who knows? We could have ourselves a Cinderella playoff run coming.
Got
You don't have the Bengals. You don't have the Bengals to cheer for. So who are you going to cheer for this playoff? Right? No
um
Bears, no Bengals.
suicide? No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
It's.
I'll buy you one of those cheese hats. You can cheer for the Packers.
Are you asking to be murdered in a video game?
Right?
I'll load up
In
GTA right
Minecraft.
now. Yeah, yeah,
Right?
yeah. I'll take my netherite sword and
Right. Doing that 10-year-old 1v1 me, bitch.
yeah. Those are fighting words. Those are fighting words. And next week podcast, it could very much be a situation like tomorrow.
Yep.
Like it's gonna be nothing but stress for me. Like for you, there could be stress there, it could be not
Hmm.
stress there, but for me, it's gonna be a very tough day because all those games against the Packers are just nothing but
Yeah.
pain and suffering for me.
Yeah. Yeah, you're going to be a ball of stress tomorrow, but then that's the last you have to deal with it until draft day and wondering whether what your team's going to do. And then you got stress free until April after tomorrow. And maybe some happiness if you guys can get a big win against the Bears or against the Packers.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
yeah.
Without a doubt, it's going to be a really, really fun week 18. Then we get
Hmm.
into the playoffs, potentially off season for both of us type
Yeah.
mode.
And we both have, we're going to have a lot of talks about who's going to be our number 1 going next year. Is it going to be Justin Fields or is it going to be Caleb Williams for the Bears? Is it going to be Kenny Pickett? Is it going to be Mason Rudolph? Or is it going to be quarterback question mark for the Steelers? Are they going to go out and get one of the free agents in Kirk Cousins, Russell Wilson? Are they going to draft a quarterback if someone like a Jaden Daniels falls all the way to them or something like that? Who knows? So
Yep.
many questions going into the draft after this season is finally over.
Without a doubt, and it's going to be a lot of fun. But for today, that's ultimately going to do it. We're going to say thank you. I'm Brendan. That's Sterling. Thank you all so much for hanging out with us here today. We will see you next week for hopefully big, bright smiles for both of us in current situations. But till then, we say peace.